The doors swing open. The smell hits first. It is January 897 AD Rome, and every person in this courtroom is staring at the same thing: a throne, a figure seated on it, dressed in full papal robes, gold vestments, the white papal mitre placed carefully on his head. He has been dead for 7 months. The flesh has begun to collapse. The jaw has started to separate. The fingers are curling inward, stiffening, turning black. And the man standing before this corpse, screaming, shaking, his face red with fury, is the current Pope of the Catholic Church. This is not myth. This is not legend. This is documented history. And by the time this trial ends, the corpse will be convicted. Its fingers will be hacked off. Its body will be dragged naked through the streets of Rome and thrown into the Tiber River. What happened in that courtroom is the most insane event in the 2,000-year history of the Church, and almost nobody knows it happened. Stay with me, because this story gets so much darker. To understand why a dead man was put on trial, you have to understand what Rome had become. The 9th century, the city that once ruled the known world, is now a ruin. The great aqueducts have collapsed. The forums are overgrown with weeds. Wolves roam the streets at night, and into this broken city, power has concentrated into the hands of one institution: the Church. But the Church is not a sanctuary. Not in 897. It is a battlefield. Noble families are buying and stealing elections. Popes are being poisoned, exiled, strangled. Rome will have 24 different popes in a century. Pope Formosus, remember that name. He is, in his 70s, a scholar, a diplomat, a man who spent his life navigating a political minefield. He had actually been exiled once before, accused of conspiracy, stripped of his priesthood. He was forced to swear he would never return. He came back anyway, because Formosus was that kind of man. Stubborn, brilliant, politically ruthless in the way that only true survivors are. When he finally became Pope at 71, he inherited a Rome being torn apart by 2 rival factions: the Spelitans and the Carolingians. Formosus made a decision that would define everything. He secretly invited the Carolingian king Arnulf of Carinthia to invade Italy. And Arnulf came, and he conquered Rome. And Formosus crowned him Holy Roman Emperor. Then Arnulf suffered a stroke. His forces retreated north. And the Spelitans, Lambert and his mother Agiltrude, marched back into Rome. Formosus was trapped. He died in April 896. He was 79 years old, and he was buried in St. Peter's Basilica with full honors. That should have been the end. It was not the end. 9 months after Formosus died, a new pope sits on the throne. Stephen VII. History describes him as volatile, erratic, consumed by hatred for his predecessor, a hatred that had been eating him alive for years. He ordered the body of Formosus exhumed. Think about what that means. January 897. 9 months of decomposition. They pulled the rotting corpse out and dressed him in full papal vestments. The white alb, the golden chasuble, the mitre. They carried him through the streets into the synod hall. And they put him on a throne. The clergy were ordered to attend. Every bishop, every cardinal. They filed in and looked at what was seated on the throne. Stephen VII stood before the assembled church and began to read the charges. The charges against Pope Formosus, dead 9 months. That he had perjured himself, coveted the papacy unlawfully, violated canon law, betraying the Spelitan dynasty. But the trial required a defense. So Stephen VII appointed a lawyer for the corpse, a deacon, young, terrified beyond description. And when Stephen read each charge, the deacon was required to answer, in Formosus's voice, as Formosus Stephen VII did not conduct this trial with dignity. He screamed. He raged. He pointed at the body with shaking hands. The verdict was guilty on all charges, and then the punishment began. First, the vestments were stripped from the body, torn off, the golden robes, the white alb removed. Then the 3 fingers on Formosus's right hand that he had used to ordain and bless were hacked off. Then they dressed the body in the clothing of a common layman, and they dragged it out of the synod hall, through the streets of Rome. At first they threw the body into a common grave, but that was not enough for Stephen VII. Days later, the body was retrieved again, and thrown into the Tiber River, into the cold January current, where the body of Pope Formosus disappeared beneath the dark water. The body of Formosus did not stay in the Tiber. A monk pulled the body from the river downstream. They recognized him. The mood of Rome shifted. Fast, the noble families began to distance themselves. And then, the earthquakes started. Stephen VII was stripped of his papal vestments, thrown into prison, and strangled in his cell. Within the same year, the chaos that followed was the beginning of the Pornocracy. The papacy was controlled by a series of powerful Roman noblewomen. Somewhere at the bottom of the Tiber River are 3 fingers that once belonged to the Pope of Rome. History records the popes and the emperors. It rarely records the terrified young men forced to give voice to the voiceless. Neither can we.